Hello everyone, it's been a while since I've done one of these videos. Been pretty busy in real life, so got a little bit extra time here, and I've got a lot of backed up footage that I've had probably since November of 2022. So I figured I'd try and throw together what I've got. So I don't know if I'm going to go quite as into detail on these fits as I normally would, just because it's kind of all over the place, hence the title of the video. We got a lot of rebalances done, or CCP rebalanced a lot of things, and we got some new ships, new destroyers. So I've just kind of been bouncing around all over the place. Not to mention someone gifted me some mid-grade snakes, so I was also playing with those a bit, which will probably be in a different video, but there is one fit in this video that will be using the mid-grade snakes, which I'll mention. It's not necessary, it's just in the recordings I had them plugged in. But yeah, so again, this video is just going to be kind of bouncing around a bunch of different ships. Mainly we're going to be looking at small ships, so frigates and destroyers, and primarily in a faction warfare setting, because that's where I've been living, since it's really the only place for pure solo at the moment. At least that's reliable to get fights without getting blobbed by everything immediately as soon as you start a fight. But we'll kind of jump into it here. Alright, so this is the first fit we'll talk about. So this is the Navy Cormorant that I've actually, probably out of this entire video, I've had the most luck with. This particular fit I have not lost. I lost the cheap fit, one of the earliest fits to Casper when it first came out, which I'll show that video in the beginning, because I think it makes a good point on why you must bling the shield booster. The Tech 2 medium shield booster just sucks. It's not good enough to tank. Yeah, you save a little bit of ISK with it, but you're just going to die against pretty much everything. But just going to just a simple C-type gives you enough tank. I mean, it gives you like almost over 100 extra DPS tank compared to the Tech 2. It's, again, it's slightly pricey, but it's not too bad. So yeah, but again, a lot of people right now, at least from what I've been seeing, maybe the meta has shifted a little bit since I had a lot of these fights, but I have this one fit with 75mm Gatling rails, which again, a lot of people typically are going with like neutron blasters and dual medium ancillaries, which those I found are just super easy to scram kite, and or you can nuke them out really easy. So with this fitting, you can't really be scram kited. The 75mm rails typically do have really low range, but because the Navy Cormorant has double range bonuses, or actually triple if you include the roll bonus and then the actual trait bonus. So you have optimal range plus fall off bonuses, and you have another optimal range bonus. So that puts your optimal range for 75mm Gatling rails at 10 kilometers with antimatter, which is well within scram range. The other thing that's nice about the 75mm Gatling rails is that you use a 10mm afterburner. So you have lots of fitting room, because they barely take any fitting compared to like neutron blasters. Yes, you're not doing 400 DPS or whatever with Void, but 400 DPS doesn't matter when you can't apply it. And if you're gonna jump up to null, well, your DPS is gonna drop significantly, but you can still get kited out from, like, for example, like against a slicer. The 75mm rails, you can still shoot a slicer with it. You just switch to iridium ammo, and your optimal goes up to like 22 kilometers, I believe, plus a fall off, and then you can use spike to shoot out to like 40 kilometers. So you're not neutered compared to like if you're using a blaster fit. The 10MN gives you plenty of speed to maneuver around, even though you don't have a web. I'd say that's the weakest thing about this fit, without you not having a web. But you have enough speed that in most cases you can make it work, and also you have enough tank that you can typically outlast your opponent. Even if they are orbiting you, you can still get some grazing shots with like javelin, and over time it'll whittle them down. You can kill them. And then again, the tank, I always use it with blue pill and hard shell. You can use the 3 or the 5% I think right now the fitting window shows a 3% because that's just what what I have on hand, but I was typically using a 5%. And that'll get you right around a 300 DPS tank. So if you kind of look at it in that aspect, there's not a lot of frigates that are doing 300 DPS that are going to break you. Obviously there's other destroyers, but for most of those destroyers, you can just scram kite them out. Or with a 10 you can kind of burn out a range, still apply with the rails, and kind of rubber band back and forth to maintain the scram, or they'll be chasing you and you can just keep reapplying scram as needed. So it's pretty straightforward there. The fitting is just a single mag stab with a damage rig. You can drop the damage rig for like another EM rig if you want. I haven't really found it particularly necessary, and you kind of want the damage rig so you have some extra damage, because without it your DPS is not great. Only 215. With it, you're at 233. Right now I have my snakes in this particular example, so don't go by the speed numbers. I think without snakes you're around 1100 to 1200 meters a second cold. And typically I'd have a power grid implant in, which I was using with a spare rocket launcher here to bump up your damage a little bit more. So with everything heated with the rocket launcher, I believe you're at about I think you're at like 290 with the rocket launcher. So it's still respectable DPS when you're heating, and again, in the case of a frigate fight, more than enough to do what you need to do. But yeah, again, with this exact fitting with the Pith C-type, I haven't lost this fit. I've fought outnumbered with it. I've fought other destroyers with it. It's been very reliable. I haven't been kited. I've killed kiters with it just because they don't expect me to apply, and they just die, especially slicers because they're not tanked very well. So again, it's a very good fit. I haven't had any issues with it, and I think it's a lot better than like the dual medium ancillary neutron blaster fits. So this first fight, I actually run across Casper here in Faction Warfare. I actually set this fight up by getting him to warp directly on top of me, so everything was really in my favor. And he's got his fit. This is the kind of standard whole tank Thrasher fleet issue, and you can see that even though I'm tenementing kind of perpendicular to him, he's still able to apply, and I'm just not getting enough reps on that T2 shield booster to actually rep this damage. So, even though everything was kind of working for me, everything was overheated, I had all my drugs running, I just couldn't tank because that shield booster sucks too much. Now with this second fight, this is kind of the same thing. I'm just not against Casper. But so I see a Thrasher fleet issue in a complex, so I go ahead and pop my drugs and warp in. This is another artillery whole tank Thrasher, and the fight actually starts out where he is at range already. So my main goal here is to try to kind of burn around. Now granted, the 10 agility isn't great, but for frigate agility or destroyer agility is still fine in my opinion. It's workable. So I kind of start off by trying to go around a little bit and not burn directly at him. And again, you can see even with antimatter at 15 kilometers, I'm still applying damage. Now granted, again, it's not great, but it's still something. So I'm kind of burning around, and in this case I'm repping that damage just fine. Now I will admit, maybe in the Casper fight I repped a little too late, but still they're not really making good progress here. I'm able to keep the damage or my tank repping, and he's not really chunking me too bad. And even just looking at how much I'm repping with each cycle here, you can see the difference between that T2 rep and the Pith C-type. I am able to get scram on them. I think maybe they just kind of messed up and didn't realize they were that I was still so close to them. And now at this point, I'm managing my afterburner because I don't want to slingshot past them and run out of scram. So I'm mainly just running my afterburner enough to stay within range. And at this point, he's low hull and I'm able to finish him off. So in this next fight, it's going to be a Slicer and a Mollusk Navy issue that warped into me. And this is kind of what I was talking about with the Iridium projection against like Slicers. He was 18, 20 kilometers, and I was able to handle him just fine with iridium. Granted, he maybe could have burned off or gotten farther away, but I think iridium is like 150 DPS or something like that. So it's not a lot, but again, it's still enough to push off things that get into point range. And then next, this smallest Navy issue comes in. At this point, I already know I kind of won the fight because smallest Navy issues don't really do a whole lot of damage. And so I'm pretty much over tanking. It's just a matter of just killing him, burning through his health with the damage I'm doing. And he goes down, so again, fighting outnumbered, dealing with something that was out of my scram range, and taking care of the second ship was well within the limits of this fit. So this next fight is against 3 Merlins that warp in on me. These are all micro warp drive, and I see them on D-scan initially, so I go ahead and pull some range. I think the one vulnerability with this fit is if you just let them land right on top of you before they start burning. So again, I pulled range to try and prevent that, and as you can see, they kind of trickle in. And with the 10 min fit, I can just pull immediately out of their damage range and kind of pull past this first one, and then he falls back, and then I switch to the next one once he's kind of out of my range. And eventually they do get 3 webs on me, so that slows me down enough to where they can kind of start doing damage. But again, by now the first one is dead, so that removes 1 web and removes some damage. So that lets me start pulling some range a little bit, or at least keeping my speed up a little bit higher. And so then I scram the second one, and again, kind of the same thing where I'm applying damage, burning away. And at this point, it's just kind of a matter of, just outlasting them. Again, Merlins don't really have any range once you get outside of that, 2,500, 3,000 kilometer mark. So one of them does actually warp off here because he realizes, he's going to be dead if he sticks around. But again, so fighting outnumbered, as long as you play it smart, is easy with this. This last fight is against a Navy Coercer that I warp in on a Plex. So the Navy Coercer could be a bit problematic because of the newt. However, most of these are fit with a small newt, so it's fairly short range. My plan here is to try to stay kind of around 7,500 meters, where that small newt loses a lot of its effectiveness. So right now my main focus is just kind of staying in that range. So I'm pulsing the afterburner, just to try and stay at that ideal range. And so again, I'm not relying too heavily on that afterburner here, especially because the Navy Coercer is so slow. It's not really necessary to keep the 10 min on. And the Navy Coercer can still do a lot of damage, but again, in this case, this isn't a super tanky one, so I was able to punch through it single rep and take it down without too much newt pressure. For this fitting, this will be going over the Coercer Navy issue. This one's a little bit different than what I typically do. This is actually more of like a faction warfare meme fit, I guess you would say, because I have a SIBO. But the theory behind it is that the Coercer Navy is really slow. You put an afterburner on it, you don't have a web, you don't really gain any ground by having an afterburner on there, at least a 1 min. Because even, again, if you use that mid for an afterburner, anything with a web, even anything without a web is faster than you. So the main point of the fit is to lock something as fast as you can when it enters your complex, so that you can tackle it and immediately start applying your newts. So there's actually kind of a lot going on with this fit, more than just it being a meme fit with the sensor booster. For one, it's using polarized lasers, and 2, I've dropped 1 gun for a second newt. So, and then I'm, because it's polarized and because it gets a raw HP bonus, this all synergizes really well with how the Coercer Navy issue works. You have kind of a few different things going on for you that offset the 0% resistance from the polarization. Again, obviously the biggest one is your HP bonus, so you can just slap a plate on it, you get all that HP out of it, and this fit still has 10,000 hit points, even though it's polarized. The other thing is that I've dropped a gun, so if this wasn't polarized, you'd see a fairly decent drop in DPS. But because it's polarized, I'm still able to do about 400 DPS with my 5 lasers. So let's see. Okay, 500 DPS. And with conflag and then heated, you can do almost 600 DPS. So this thing still does a ton of damage. Obviously you're a little bit range limited. But the other thing, again, now that you have those 2 newts, and these are bonus newts, you're newting out 166 gigajoules every 6 seconds. So you basically have a medium newt's worth of newt pressure, which is devastating against pretty much every frigate. So the point is to latch on to something as fast as possible, either burn it down with a lot of DPS or cap it out. The main issue with this fit is, again, you can, even if you instantly apply and put on newts and, do damage, everything's faster than you can still get out of range. So I've made some tweaks of this. I haven't tested it yet, but basically I drop polarization and use a 10mm fit. But I still keep the dual newts, because I think a lot of people want to ignore the newt bonus on the Coercer Navy issue. But I think it's one of its stronger bonuses, and I prefer leaning into the newt bonus more than the DPS of the ship. Because these newts are really strong once you can get them on, and if you can just stay in range of the newts, there's not a whole lot that's going to be able to tank you or sustain. And so there's a few fights that kind of show that, at least the newt pressure and how it can kind of save you. But this will probably be another ship I come back to later to test out the 10mm fit. But for the footage in this video, this will be the fitting that you see. So the first fight with the Navy Coercer is I'm warping in on a Navy Cormorant, and this is the standard dual medium ancillary shield booster with neutron blasters. And being that I'm polarized, this is actually kind of a dangerous warp in because he's doing a lot of damage and I'm polarized. But I'm trying to rely here on those double newts, and so I'm heating them initially, and then I start heating the lasers, and I'm able to punch through his shield boosters pretty effectively, but as you can tell, he's still doing a lot of damage to me as well. And you can kind of see that, he drops tackle and then his damage is dropping off. So those newts are working. But he's still able to pulse his guns every once in a while to get a hit, and you can see that I almost got me there, but I got it at the very end. And in this fight with a Navy Coercer, I have a Merlin and Comet warping on me. So right now I'm just gonna hit whoever's closest to me with this with the newts. In this case, the Merlin is closest, and he pretty much gets melted by the 500 DPS before the newts really even do anything. And then the Comet is at range. Now, being that I do have one A-type newt, I am still able to apply decent newt pressure to him, and he starts to burn in on me to probably try and get underneath my guns, and he's maybe assuming this is just a single newt fit, but with the double newts, it starts to take effect pretty quickly. He does have a NOS, but you can kind of see at the very end his speed drops, which is likely his afterburner shutting off, and then that allows me to track better with the multi-frequency, and he goes down at that point once he's not able to maintain a fast orbit. And following in the footsteps of the Navy Coercer is the buffed or changed Ishkur, depending on how you want to look at it. This is kind of a controversial change, a lot of people feel like, or at least from what I've been seeing people say, where they, the Ishkur had a low move to a mid, but then it also got an armor rep bonus. So people feel like there's kind of conflicting bonuses and slot layouts, but Galente have always been bonused around having more mids than a Mar compared to their low slot count. Even though they're both armor focused races, Galente, again, traditionally have always had more mids than a Mar. So this kind of distinguishes a little bit. Again, I know I can understand how it's. I feel like the Ishkur could still be better, but I think there is still some viability to this particular layout. So this is kind of what I've came up with. So I dropped a gun and I'm focusing on newt pressure. So, what the Ishkur brings now is that with those 4 mids, you can now do Afterburner, Scram Web, Cat Booster. Whereas before you couldn't have a web. You would only do like Afterburner, Scram, Cat Booster if you wanted to have any kind of cap sustainability. And so I dropped a gun. We just have 2 light neutron blasters, 2 small newts, and then your lows are just focusing on your tank. So we're just plugging the explosive hole with a A-type explosive plating, ADCU, and then a bonus armor rep. So you're not really expected to do a ton of damage with this fit, although again this fit still does 230 DPS with just 2 blasters in your drone. So it's not like you're doing no damage like a Newt Tristan. And plus you have the ADCU to rely on. So a lot of this is built around just outlasting whatever you're fighting, and eventually you'll whittle them down and kill them. And the ADCU helps with that, so you can pop it and just keep, applying those newts to eventually turn off whatever you need to turn off. So either you can mitigate better, or in the case of blaster and laser ships, they just stop working. But yeah, again, it's a pretty straightforward fit. Nothing too exciting. It's cheap. There's no bling on this really. Like this A-type explosive plating is, I think, under $1 million. But yeah, I think it's a good ship to be tricky with because people aren't expecting it. Maybe they will be after this video. But it kind of falls in the footsteps of like the Newt Tristan, and then kind of what I was doing with the Navy Coercer. So with this Ishkur fit, I have a Navy Coercer warp in on me. This Navy Coercer does have a newt, just a single newt, so there's actually kind of a newt pressure game being played here of who can newt out who. Now, I do think that the Navy Coercer especially is actually susceptible to a lot of newt pressure because they're never going to have a cat booster. Most likely they're not going to have a NOS. And this particular Navy Coercer doesn't, I think this is just an afterburner web. So it doesn't have any tackle, and you can kind of see that I'm fighting against my own newt pressure and his own newt pressure that he's putting on me. So I have to work around that a little bit. I leave my web turned off. I activate ADCU to allow me to get that, to allow me to cat boost again without taking too much damage. And that rep bonus is really nice here because even though I'm under a lot of cap pressure, that rep is still getting me, at least keeping me alive. And the main thing here against the Navy Coercer is that I wanted to keep that afterburner on to try to mitigate as much damage as I can, since it doesn't get a tracking bonus. So I'm prioritizing the afterburner and the newts, and at this point you can see that he drops the web. I'm no longer being newted. He's no longer shooting me. So, again, in this case, the newts are doing their job. And it's just kind of a matter of finishing them off, whittling through all that armor that the Navy Coercer has. And so now we've pretty much stabilized. And, I think this is a good example of kind of punching up with the Ishkur and what it can do, especially with what this fit is designed to do. You're not really looking at max DPS, you're looking at just controlling the fight, shutting them down, and then just slowly chewing through them. So for this next fight with the Ishkur, it's against a Navy Cormorant. This actually just happened at the sun. He was able to land near me, so we ended up brawling at the sun. This is kind of a similar situation. Again, this is another dual medium ancillary shield booster Navy Corm. And actually, I think this fight is easier because the Ishkur has really good resistances against hybrid damage. And so I'm able to tank him a little bit easier. Now, either he disconnects or he rage quit. I'm not sure because his tackle turned off, his damage turned off, and then he left local. So either he disconnected or again he capped out and he rage quit. I don't know. In either case, though, it really wouldn't have mattered. He would have lost here because I was tanking him just fine. And it's just again another good showcase of the Ishkur, or the Newt Ishkur anyway. I couldn't use this fit as much as I wanted to just because of kind of how faction warfare is right now with the advanced sights. They're very kind of hard to find. And then you basically just have to sit in there and wait for someone to come to you, because the chances of you finding someone in an advanced spawn or an advanced site is kind of slim. Again, just due to the rarity. So I didn't get as many fights as I wanted with this, but the few fights I did get with it, I was pretty satisfied with how it worked out. This fitting is on an older Sabre fit I made quite a while ago, so we might be talking probably close to a year ago that I made this and potentially have footage of it. This was before the Navy Thrasher came out, so this was kind of the idea I was tinkering with before then, of how does a max projection AC Sabre work out? Because really the only two Minmatar small ships that had fall-off bonuses is the Wolf and the Sabre, at least at the time. And the Sabre kind of gets a bad rap because it's flown by a lot of nullsec people that don't know what they're doing. So they just always load hail and they have no projection. So you can almost always scram kite a Sabre, at least when you run across one in null, because they again just have hail loaded and they have no projection. So I was kind of playing off of that mindset of, okay, well, if everyone underestimates a Sabre, then maybe I can kind of go against that expectation that they can just scram kite you to death, or try and just outright kite you. And so I kind of came up with the max projection Sabre here. Now this fit is super tight. As you can see in the fitting window, it's not fitting. That's because this was originally flown with a 2% power grid implant, so you need a 2% to get this to fit. Again, disregard the speed because I have my snake send, but this goes about 2400 cold without snakes. You have to use the medium canyon shield extender because, again, this is a super tight fit. If you don't use it, there's no other way to get this to fit without the canyon, or I guess you could use an abyssal shield extender to get the power grid in if you wanted to. The bubble, I guess, is situational. If you're using it in low sec, you don't need the bubble, which saves you a tiny bit of power grid, which might get this to fit. Overall, though, I know a lot of people thought that the Sabre was like the greatest thing for a long time, and as an interdictor, yes, that's true. It was a good interdictor, but doing anything outside the interdictor role, it's always been pretty terrible at. I really wish it got just a little bit more power grid when they redid all the interdictors, so it could do more interesting things. Like you can't use artillery on a Sabre. I mean, technically you can, but it's going to be like the worst fit imaginable. So it would have been nice if this got a little bit more power grid, but again, kind of going off on a tangent here. So both of your rigs are ambit extensions, just to give you more fall off, to kind of build off that fall off bonus. So using Barrage, you get a 23 kilometer fall off range. You can also use this with like Synth Soothsayer to get just a little bit more fall off. I find that at max point range it kind of tickles everything to death, so it's not great there, but at least you can still apply damage even at point range. So if something is kiting you, again, there's a chance you can force it off enough to at least warp off. It is dual propped because, again, its main focus here is brawling, and I want to be able to apply the most damage I can at the edge of scram. So I'm going to be counter scram kiting with it, trying to stay out of range, staying in that sweet spot of like 9 to 12 kilometers where I'm still applying decent damage, but most things can't hit you. So the MWD helps to catch things trying to kite away from you or just reposition better, and the afterburner is so you can actually scram kite. It's pretty squishy. You've pretty much just got the DCU and the shield extender for tank, so you really got to kind of play it on the knife edge so you're not taking a lot of damage, so you can actually you know, kill things without dying. Overall, it worked out fairly well, but pretty much since the release of the Navy Thrasher just does everything that this could do better. But still, I had some good fights with it, so we'll go and show those off. So with the first fight with this Sabre, I run across a Hecate, and this was back when I was still in roaming nullsec from a wormhole. So in this case, I'm mainly just I'm kind of skirting that 13 to 10 kilometer range here, and doing kind of drive-by scrams, letting the barrage kind of work at range. Like, I don't want to fully commit yet because I want to wear them down a little bit in case they're a smart Hecate pilot and have null loaded. In this case, though, I'm kind of like fumbling because I'm waiting for him to web and scram me, and he never does. Like, he gets a web on me in the very beginning, and then he drops it, and so I'm expecting that scram to pop up, and I'm trying to anticipate it and press the afterburner button, but it never happens. So I just decycle my MWD and then go in at 7500 to finish him off. And at this point, I thought it was kind of over, but then I noticed that here in a moment, an Eris pops up on scan. So he must have been warping to him during the fight. And so I prepared for this. He must have warped before the bubble was up because he lands right in the middle of it, which is fine. I end up making a mistake here because I burn out of range. I burn to 7500 again to mitigate the damage that Eris can do, since it'll most likely be a blaster fit. But I end up slingshotting a little bit past my scram range, which allows him to reactivate the MWD, and so then I'm not able to get him back in range because my afterburner is still running. So I have to decycle the afterburner and then get the micro warp drive back up. So he ends up getting away. I try and slow him down with another bubble, but by then he's well out of my range. He's faster than me because he's probably just a pure tackle Eris, so he's just probably got like an overdrive or a polycarbon or something like that. And then at this point, a Vedmak jumps through the gate that we were on, so it's time for me to get out of there. So I see a Citadel on the gate grid, and just go ahead and warp to it so I can break off from the Vedmak and get away, because as you can see, that Vedmak's not even spooled and he's already chunking me. In the next fight with the Sabre, I run across an actual brawling Jaguar, not a tackle Jaguar, and kind of the same situation here. I'm not ready to commit just yet. I'm wanting to kind of soften him up by staying at range, do a couple drive-bys, because again, a Jaguar doesn't have a range bonus on its rockets, so I don't want to get on top of it and take damage, and I kind of want to stay out that edge of that scram range so he's not applying any damage to me with the rockets, because again, this is a very squishy Sabre. So at this point, I go ahead and commit. Now he's used up some shield boosts, and you can see, even though the Jaguar really doesn't do a whole lot of damage, he's able to get me down to low shield pretty quick. He starts to burn off because I think he's dual prop with web, where I just have the afterburner, so he's still faster than me, but he still gets out to 15 kilometers, and because I have that range with barrage, I'm still able to kill him at range. So this next fight was actually kind of a setup fight with me and another BSB person, because we were both roaming nullsec and couldn't find fights, as is the standard, at least back then. So we decided to go ahead and fight each other. And so he was in a wolf, and I was in the Sabre. His wolf is actually fit kind of similarly to my Sabre, where it was like an AC kite fit. So in this case, I'm trying to stay away, because the Sabre does do more damage than the wolf using kind of the same configuration. So I'm kind of like trying to win the DPS race there. I do have an afterburner where he's just MWD with a point, so I'm again kind of slingshotting back and forth to stay out of his optimal damage range and stay in mine, and just doing drive-by scrams as needed. And then at the very end, I scram and then activate the afterburner, and it gets pretty close. I'm half whole by the time he goes down, so definitely a close fight there. And with another interdictor and polarized fit, I just can't get enough of polarized. And the Flycatcher actually has good bonuses for polarization, but a lot of people tend to tend towards the brawly version, whereas in this case I actually went for more of a kitey version because I was looking at comparing basically a light missile launcher Flycatcher to a rocket version. You know, being able to point and still apply with rockets, you're going to apply a lot better with rockets than you would with light missile launchers. So I was kind of seeing how far I could push this. You know, you still have 8600 EHP with the double MSEs, decent speed. Now this is the fit that these recordings are with me with snakes in, which you don't necessarily need. The Flycatcher is pretty fast without them, but with them it definitely ups the survivability quite a bit and allows you to catch things and stay out of range as needed. So with this fit, you're just using a missile computer for some extra range, and then you're pretty much exclusively using javelin, unless if you want to just burn in on something and switch to rage or Cal Navy. So let's go ahead and put some rockets in here. So we've got 25 kilometer range, and you're doing 239 DPS, 240 DPS if you want to round up. And actually, let's put a script in here. So yeah, with this scripted for range, you actually have a 28 kilometer range with javelin. You know, obviously not as long as light missiles, but you apply a lot better. And you know, for the sake of your long point, you know, your long point goes out to 29. Your missiles go out to 28, so you know you have that overlap. You have plenty of range to work with as needed. I thought this fit was actually a lot of fun to use. It did decent damage. You had some flexibility between, you know, using Cal Navy and javelin, especially in faction warfare. You know, a lot of people see a rocket Flycatcher, they don't expect you to apply to nearly 30 kilometers or, you know, go 3K a second. I guess the only thing I would say is the only reason I lost this is because I tried to brawl a Kikimora, so that doesn't work out too well. But I'm probably going to make another one of these at some point just because it was a lot of fun to fly, and just kind of subverted expectations, I guess you could say. So the first hit with the Flycatcher is against a Catalyst and a Navy Coercer that come in. And as it always happens when I'm flying any kind of bling, in this case my snake pods, I tend to just become really stupid and for some reason not pay attention to anything. So once the Catalyst warps in, I'm assuming that it was like an afterburner fit initially, so that's why I wasn't very reactive here. And of course, for whatever reason, it takes me forever to lock him because he's holding his invulnerability. So I kind of lose focus because I'm tired of trying to lock them, and you know, then the Navy Coercer comes in behind them, and so I just start applying damage to the Catalyst, and now the Catalyst starts micro driving towards me, and again, because I'm stupid, I don't notice immediately, so I start trying to burn away, you know, way too late. So he catches me. Thankfully, he catches me kind of at the edge edge of his damage, so he's not applying a ton of damage to me right now, and I'm able to still, you know, kill him pretty quickly. At the very end, he does get a really big hit on me, but at this point, now I go ahead and start setting up my range and orbit on the Navy Coercer, and the Navy Coercer, while it has the same range bonuses as the, you know, like the Slicer and Retribution, they're normally never fit with the same range mods in mind. So they really don't have that good of a range. However, I'm orbiting in the range where he's still able to apply decently. I'm kind of at that very edge of his range. And in this particular fight, I actually kind of learn where I need to be against Navy Coercers. You kind of got to be hugging that like 21 kilometer range for them not to really apply any damage to you. Because at this point it was a DPS race between, you know, my polarized shield, where he's still applying damage, and then the big EHP brick of the Navy Coercer. So I kind of start fiddling with my ranges, and he's not applying as much damage. I do drop into armor, but he's in hold now. And so I'm able to finish him off and score those 2 kills with this. And the last fight with the Flycatcher is again against another Navy Coercer. So I had more fights with the Flycatcher. It's just they weren't really exciting. It was kind of against like afterburner frigates that just warped into a Plex and got, again, just got kited to death. I don't really consider those super interesting fights because there's no real risk involved. Whereas in this cases, I'm at least fighting things that are able to shoot back, and we're kind of fighting with the polarized versus non-polarized kind of fit. So this is very similar to the previous Navy Coercer fight. This one, again, I'd kind of already figured out the ranges I needed to be at. So in this case, I think I went a little bit farther here, and so then I couldn't apply any damage. So I had to work it back in a little bit closer, but you can kind of see my tank stabilizes, and then I'm still able to start applying back, and get my kind of find that right balance between the damage I'm taking and then the damage I'm dishing out. I think this Navy Coercer might have actually also been fit a little bit better, so it was a little bit tankier. But again, kind of the same story, just as once I stabilize, and I'm able to bring them down and take care of it. But again, I definitely enjoyed this fit a lot. This is part of the meta shift video. I just never submitted it because I got busy in real life. So this was kind of one of those interdictor submissions for different fits for interdictors. So this was my potential option. But yeah, so I kind of like making up things with polarized a lot more often. I'm finding a little bit more niche uses for them. And that's it for this video. So, I've just kind of got background of my Navy Thrasher fit very similarly to how my Sabre was fit. So you can kind of watch that as I'm ending this out. I decided not to make a dedicated fitting for that, just because I really only got this fight with it before I kind of lost interest in it. But yeah, so again, sorry for the delay in any new videos. Just been really busy, and also just kind of taking a breather from Eve for a little bit. Things just kind of gotten to that point where my particular playstyle is just getting harder and harder and taking more and more time, and I've kind of got other things going on. But I'm kind of getting back into it now, so maybe we'll get some more footage and more videos. Maybe try and get another video up of all my snaked meme battleship fits, so we'll see how that works out if I can get some actual decent fights. But hope you enjoyed, and see you in the next one.